Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got another update regarding the Alberta situation. People within Alberta, at least some of them, petitioning to become the 51st state, which I view as a bit more realistic than all of Canada becoming the 51st state. And certainly, logistically, it makes a lot more sense for a conservative administration to accept Alberta rather than all of Canada as a state, considering Alberta very likely would be Republican, all of Canada would be extremely liberal, and it'd be about 55 total electoral votes if all of Canada became a state, as opposed to just Alberta, where you're talking about a per person GDP, like top 10 in US if they became a state. They've got the number one per person GDP in all of Canada, and they are an absolute powerhouse in terms of gas and oil production. And about 25% of our energy comes from Alberta alone. So this is big stuff. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but Alberta, when you're talking about one singular province, if you are a Republican, by far, no questions asked, that would join the US, Alberta would be number one. Not even close. And it's based off of not only the way they vote, but also the amount of resources they have. They're number one in terms of the provinces, in terms of natural resources, and their energy production is impressive. They've also got a technological sector. It's about $13 billion committed there. This is a powerhouse of a province. And so you can see you've got delegation from Alberta headed to Washington to discuss statehood. Now, when it comes to what Donald Trump has said about individual provinces, there hasn't been much in the way of Trump's words on that. It's been more so he wants all of Canada, and Trump supporters have said, oh, it's a joke, it's funny. I've been kind of like, I don't know, is it really a joke at this point? Now, Trump, again, with the tariffs, he's delayed them until April 2nd. And for this time, I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if there was some negotiation or what it was, or maybe just because of where the stock market is right now. I know he always looks at that. Maybe he's not too happy, but Trump is going to have to figure out what he wants to do with these tariffs, because there is, if you do keep the tariffs on Canada, tariffs are a longer term solution, which to me doesn't really necessarily fit the Trump profile, to where I'm sure he wants to have a really good economy right now, but it would be like a short-term sacrifice within the next 4 or 5 months with the tariffs and potentially raised prices, because that's what happens. It is what it is, but it's a long-term solution to bring domestic production and make the US more self-sufficient, rather than having, I mean, honestly, I don't necessarily mind relying on Canada for certain things, just because if they can produce it and they're experts in a certain product, it's not a big deal, considering we have a good relationship with them. And it's not like they can strong arm us because of the relationship dynamics between the US and Canada. Obviously, we're a lot more stronger than them. They're going to want to have a good trade relationship with us. Now, they're doing all this posturing because you can do this if you are Canada, at least for a short period of time. The idea is to alienate the idea of tariffs when it comes to the American people, which would turn the American people against Trump. And then Trump would say the tariffs are not worth it. My approval rating is down. They're very unpopular. The economy isn't in a great place right now with the stock market because of the tariff situation. So they're trying to do that. But at a certain point, if Trump sticks to his guns, which honestly, he's delayed them now. This is the second time he's delayed most of the tariffs. And I think because the delayed tariffs with Mexico were the tariffs, the product that falls under, or the exports that fall under the North American Trade Agreement, which is about 60% of the exports. So 60% of the exports from Mexico to the United States, the tariff has been paused on those. And I think it's the exact same thing with Canada. So I don't know what he wants to do with that, but the way tariffs work into this whole idea of Alberta, obviously, Alberta would suffer greatly from this, considering we get 25% of our energy from them directly, their specific province. And so, considering they're more conservative, we understand the liberals are going to turn and they're going to hate Trump even more for doing this, and they're going to galvanize, and their economy is going to suffer, but they don't care. But you've got a conservative province that might say, hey, we could be in a much better financial situation if we just joined the United States. And there's really nothing. I mean, obviously, this would have to be something that would be voted on in a referendum to leave, based off of the Clarity Act that they put into place in 2001. And then they would apply for statehood for the United States. And I think any Republican would love to have Alberta. It would be based on the per person GDP, based on the natural resources. it would be a big coup for us. I mean, that is like gerrymandering Canada. It's taken the one. I mean, you could talk about another province in Saskatchewan possibly being more conservative, but Alberta would be the one province you would think. Worst case, it's a center type, but I think it would be more Republican. I know some people are kind of wary on that, considering even the Republicans in Canada tend to be more liberal. I mean, they're all supporting Ukraine. But in general, I think Alberta would be a little bit more conservative. Even worst case, I mean, it's only 9 electoral votes. It's not like you're adding 50 electoral votes and they're all liberal. You're adding 9 electoral votes of a swing state or maybe a slightly more conservative state. That's something that I think would be really interesting. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I think it probably requires Trump to really stick to his guns on the tariffs to create a worse economic situation for Alberta, which would in turn force them to try and find a lifeline that Trump could give them. It's like he gives them a problem, then you give them a solution that could be better for them. And it's not like if Alberta joined the United States, Canada could do anything about it. What is Canada going to do? Invade Alberta? That's part of the United States now. They're not going to do that. So, look, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there are certain things to where it could definitely work when you're talking about. I've said I don't think Trump should touch Canada. It doesn't make sense. But if you are talking about one province, it would be Alberta. That would be the one province based off of everything, based off of the amount of energy that gets generated, based off of, you're only talking about 4 or 5 million people. You're not dealing with a ton of people. That's kind of like the whole idea of Greenland. Greenland is legit 57,000 people. It's nothing. So it's easy to add something like that, and that would be a territory. That's completely different. Alberta would, I think, be a state because of the amount of people. You'd probably get one Republican governor. You'd get your 2 Republican senators, maybe. I mean, I think they would vote right. But it's not even just that they'd vote right. You're adding a province that by far is the most lucrative in terms of money generation within Canada. And so that's basically the situation. We'll have to see what Trump says about Alberta. I'm guessing, because this seems like something that Trump would comment on. I'm guessing he'll talk about it just because he's always talked about the whole idea of adding Canada as the 51st state. And people say, well, it's a troll. Well, to me, this is more realistic, even though it is unrealistic still, because if you look at the opinion polls in Canada in all the provinces, the only one that's even close, and it's not even that close, would be Alberta. From what I saw, it was like 75-25 in terms of joining the US, but this was a poll that was taken back in December, so maybe it's changed a little bit. The idea would be, and it's the same type of thing with Greenland, to where you have to give the citizens a reason to want to join you. So you have to give them a better economic situation. Like in Greenland, you're talking about such a small amount of people. The US can easily entice them with economic incentives, with investment, with commitment to their major cities in terms of infrastructure build up, as well as people have pondered just giving the citizens their money, because you want to do it diplomatically. And if it's such a small amount of people, you do. And then the same thing with Alberta. You have these tariffs on. Well, right now they're paused. Again, I just don't know what Trump is going to do with the tariffs. You could say, well, it's all a leverage play, and maybe it is for a renegotiated trade deal. But he keeps pausing them. Is he spooked out by the economy right now? I mean, it's a short-term thing. It is what it is. If you do put the tariffs on, it's got to be something that's committed to for a long period of time. And then you're going to see the effect of the domestic investment into the United States, because there's going to have to be less of an outsource in terms of the product we get. But, I mean, I think the U.S. should have a good relationship with Mexico and Canada. It's kind of hard to have a good relationship with Mexico because they're so corrupted by the cartels. And maybe you can foster a good relationship within that, to where the Mexican government works with the U.S. government on intel to try and get rid of the cartels. We'll see. I mean, from what I've heard, it's been pretty hostile, which is crazy to me. You'd think they would be on board with it, but a lot of it is manipulation by the cartels within their own government. So when it comes to Alberta, there's a lot it's got going for it as a province. If you are a conservative or Republican in the United States and you wanted one province from Canada, it would be Alberta, and there's really not a close second. There's just not. Based off of all of the factors when it comes to, they're pretty self-sufficient. They generate a ton of money. They generate a ton of energy for the United States. And they are the one province that you could say is conservative. And again, that's a Canadian conservative, but they are called the Texas of Canada because of the oil generation. and because of their politics. They are the most conservative. Saskatchewan would probably be number 2 when it comes to that. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm sure they're probably gonna. We'll see if they end up talking to Trump, but who knows? These type of things, they tend to fizzle out. But it depends with the tariff situation and also this election. I mean, if they end up electing a conservative government, would there really be a need for them to decide to leave Canada? It seems unlikely. If they elect a liberal government again, I think there would be a lot more energy for seceding from Canada. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.